Hey, this is Bob Flaherty, the Electric Principal, and I'm here to talk about something really important, especially if you're new to EVs. It's going to be your first EV, and you're just learning the ropes. Most people don't realize that, the average EV buyer isn't necessarily a 24-year-old who's a software engineer and just watches YouTube every day, all day long in their spare time. That's not the average EV buyer. I mean, in many cases, 20 and 30 somethings are just trying to buy a house. They're trying to pay off their student debt. Those are the kind of things that those EV buyers, potential EV buyers, are doing, and so they're not going to purchase a new EV. The average EV buyer is over 50. They're affluent. I mean, it's a $50,000 purchase for many people, or even a $40,000 purchase after tax breaks. That doesn't necessarily come easy to everyone. They're usually someone who's educated, and many of them are not into all the techno stuff. They're not into all the engineer speak. They're not into all the statistics necessarily of an electric car. What they're really interested in, not 0 to 60, what they're really interested in, many of them, even though electric cars are fast, is they don't want to own a car that puts exhaust into the atmosphere. That's their biggest concern. So when they come to a dealership, and if that's you I'm describing, when you come to a dealership, it's not necessarily the finance or the price or the service department, which is very important. It's not even necessarily that I'm going to step in the dealership and I'm going to be out in a half hour with my new car. That's really not the most important thing. The most important thing are the salespeople. You need to find a really good salesperson that knows their job. And part of that means knowing about these cars, how they operate. It's a steep learning curve, folks, for many people when they buy an EV. I've got an 82-year-old lady who came and bought an EV from me. She was not technologically literate at all, but she really wanted an EV because of the reasons I just stated. She wanted to move to the next world in terms of not polluting, very efficient, cost-effective driving that didn't require gasoline. That's why she bought an EV. And when you buy an EV, you're going to have someone possibly teach you about home charging, what kind of charger to put into your house. You're going to have a salesman who knows the difference about chargers, like level 3 or DC fast chargers is the correct way to say it, knows the difference that not all DC fast chargers are created equal. I had a salesman, I kid you not, who asked me the other day why this Ioniq 6 he was charging wasn't charging fast enough. It was only charging at a minimum level. Why doesn't it charge as fast as they say it does, Bob? Well, because you're at a slower fast charger. You're at a 62 kilowatt DC fast charger. Well, that's not going to charge as fast. That's the basic knowledge that every salesperson should have. A salesperson is going to have to teach you about the various apps, how to find and electrify America. They're going to have to teach you about an app called PlugShare. They're going to have to teach you about ChargePoint. All those things are important for a new EV driver to learn. It's just essential. You're going to have to learn how to road trip. A lot of my customers don't end up road tripping. I'll say, hey, have you taken that car out for a road trip? Oh no, Bob, I'm thinking of doing it this summer. They've owned the car for 2 years. I mean, they just do local driving. But I love road tripping my EV. It's a lot of fun. And it's especially a lot of fun when it doesn't cost me anything the first 2 or 3 years I own the car. All right, so that's something that you have to be taught. You have to know that the tires aren't going to last as long. When you buy an EV as a regular car, well, the car weighs 4,500 pounds, has tons of torque, instantaneous, and that's gonna, even if you're a conservative driver, that's gonna burn up rubber faster. I see more threads on different areas saying, why aren't my tires lasting? The tires they sold me are crummy. No. You're driving a different animal. And you need to know that when you buy an electric car. And so, people used to ask me all the time, because I was a tech guy, they'd say, hey, Bob, what kind of computer should I buy? Should I buy an Apple? Should I buy a PC? What kind of computer should I buy? And I would tell them, buy the computer that your best friend owns. Why? Because you got somebody who can help you, who can teach you the ins and outs. And when you have a problem, they can help you problem solve. So what's the most important thing about choosing a dealership? Well, guys, if all you're interested in is the lowest possible price, well, you might get what you pay for. And what you really need is a dealership that will support you in your EV journey. I believe in education from the word go. And I've never been a fan of places where we're not into education. We just say, well, watch 5 videos and we're going to hand you the keys to a $45,000 car. You're on your own. That is not the way to treat people, I got a true story. I had an 82-year-old guy who was, he's a super smart guy. He used to be in charge of communications and setting up communications for the Secretary of State of the United States. Favorite person was Colin Powell, little side thought. But that's what he did, technologically literate. And I went and visited my mother-in-law in Chautauqua, Wisconsin, in the middle of nowhere, not a supercharger in sight. The guy came out and asked me, Bob, could you teach me about my electric car? And I did. And hey, Augie, shout out to you. Good guy. But, that's not the way to get people to fall in love with electric cars and appreciate them. That's the way to get somebody to become frustrated and say, I'm never going to drive an electric car again. So that's not the way to go. And so if you can find a salesperson who owns an EV, that would be best. If you can find an EV salesperson who seems really knowledgeable about what they're doing, that's a must. You're paying $50,000 for a vehicle. You need to expect that. You need to expect that if you need a second delivery, that's going to be happening. As a matter of fact, I recommend that before you sign the paperwork, you already have a second delivery scheduled with your salesperson, especially if you're not that person who's technologically all that adept. And I'd say 50% of EV buyers fall into that category based on the EVs that I have sold. That's what you need to do. And so you need to find someone who supports you. No, I kid you not, I have had people pay me a daily rate to come to them out of state and teach them about their EV. And I'm honored when that happens. I make new friends. I travel to new places. It's great, but I should never have to do that. Those people shouldn't have a need to reach out to an expert or reach out to a salesperson in another state and have them come and teach them about EVs. I'm more than happy to do that. But what they really need to do is pick somebody at a dealership who could really help them with their car, and pick a dealership that really wants to sell EVs. They're into it. The Washington Post just put out an article about, how dealerships are killing EV sales. The number one reason is, because when you sell an EV, you're going to have a second delivery. You're going to have to explain a lot to a person who's new to EVs. You just can't toss them the keys and say, hey, here's your car. You've driven cars before. You know what you're doing. It doesn't work that way. So salesmen will sometimes avoid that. And a little known secret, a lot of people think that salesmen make more money selling new cars. No. Salesmen in many dealerships make more money if they sell used cars. There's more markup. There's more margin on the cars. And so that's how they make money. So there are salespeople who will avoid cars that will consume their time because they're trying to feed their families. They're trying to make enough of a living. But you need to find a dealership that is willing to invest the money to have people that are going to help you on this EV journey, because this is the way I still believe we're going to go. I'm not one of those guys who watches the news. I saw some guy who owns multiple dealerships in Wisconsin talking about the lack of interest in EVs. You know who had the lack of interest? That guy. he had the lack of interest and a lack of knowledge, and he's on NBC News telling people that, well, EVs are just a hassle. EVs aren't all that great. Yeah, he's from Wisconsin, my home state, that has a lousy charging network. And he's speaking for the whole country. Sometimes I do get irritated. But that's what you need to do. So I really encourage you to look at an EV, to go to a dealership that's going to help you, to reach out. If you've never used YouTube before, this would be a good time to start, and find out the ins and outs of how this car works and how it's going to fit into your life and whether it's the right choice for you. There's some people that maybe shouldn't drive an EV. If it's going to be your only car and you got a 5-state area that you're covering, maybe an EV isn't the best choice, even though you're going to save on fuel, right? I mean, you have other needs that might be a priority. But if you're like many people and it's going to be a car that, you believe in and you want to use, and maybe you've got 2 cars. You got one non-EV and one EV. Well, guess what? You've got the best of all possible worlds, and an EV is going to work for you. And an EV is going to be an economical choice when it comes to putting fuel in it. And most importantly, you're going to reach your objective of not putting out exhaust out the back of that tailpipe. Hey, thanks again for joining me on this channel. This is Principal Bob, the Electric Principal. Hey, if you like this content, please give it a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to my channel as we move on here. Thank you very much.